here. I'm just going to do a real quick tour of the remote room very quickly so you guys can see what we use during the night. And I'm going to start with all of our status panels over here. On the far right over here is our camera that shows 4 of the cameras that are mounted on the outside, the upper panel there. The one below it, and actually the 2 bottom ones on that right-hand side, are our water vapor on the far right and the infrared image from the satellite, so we can kind of watch the clouds as they come in through the night. The 2 in the middle on the top are both of our cloud cameras. Those do slightly longer images so that we can actually see clouds coming up over the ridges, for example, and see clouds in the sky. The one here points to the south, the other one points to the east. The one to the east is pointed to the east mainly because that's where the majority of the fog rolls in usually in the trade winds. So we decided that was one of the major directions we needed to do that. Below that, we have our data coming from both our SkyProbe and our MCAM. So it tells us on top, the top panel shows us what roughly what the seeing is from the top of our weather tower. And the one on the bottom is showing us how much extinction we have based on the camera that is mounted on the telescope, and that is looking where we are looking in the night. And then, of course, I've got our all-sky camera here on the far left. That is a difference image, actually, that shows whether or not there are clouds. And, you know, if there are clouds and they're moving pretty quickly, you see black and white bands because they move and you see all of these streaks across the image. Right now, the way it looks with just the noise means that it's either completely uniform clouded over or it's completely clear. And usually it's completely clear when you see something that's just noise as it is right now. And then the lower one actually is our status panel for the telescope, tells us where we're pointed, tells us what the weather is as well. And it also tells us a little bit of information about how well the guider is doing, keeping the stars uniform in the field, and it shows the little corrections that are sent to the telescope from the guiders. And so that is, and we have a nice little Pac-Man there, and I don't know if you can actually see it, but this is our little Pac-Man that shows us where the telescope and dome are pointed, and usually they are pointed in the same direction. If they're not, we've got a problem, obviously. So over here, we have the rest of our screens. This one right here actually takes care of the telescope. This is our telescope control computer. And so we can move the telescope around. There's a copy of this at the summit as well, obviously. We can do pretty much anything with the telescope that we need to do with this. And we also keep on it the guider, the CAS guider, when it is available. And also the guiders for MegaCam are usually run off of that computer as well. So that will be all the controls. And for example, the day crew has a copy of this up at the summit because they need to balance the telescope when we swap instruments. So, so that's the telescope control. And next we have our instrument sessions over here. So this is our instrument session. You can see right now we've got MegaCam on the telescope right now. So this is a pretty big 1.2 square degree field from MegaCam. And we have, this is the control, our observing tool that we use to send the cue. We have a logging form so that we can log all of the information that we need to on there and make little comments about the images as they come off. We have the director window, which this is how all of the information gets sent to the instrument and the telescope is through our director. And we can actually watch this as it's going and make sure that it's going to the right place. And we also have, with our particular displays here, we can actually bring up one of the individual amps that is being read out from the array. And that's how we get very quick look IQs for the images as we're taking the data to make sure that we're getting it in the proper parameters for the observers. Over here, we actually have another window. This is our RO mini Mac. And essentially you can also do logging over here, but you can also bring up, for example, what I like to do is I like to have up the night planner. And so this will tell you, this will take any one of the cues that have been made up for the night, and it will show you how that is going to work through the night. And you can actually go through and try and figure out, like, maybe I want to delete this one, or maybe you can see this one only has one image left to do out of it. So you can actually change it so that it's a little bit smaller, and then you can realign it so that you can get a better timing for how things are going to fall through the night. So that's one of the major tools that we use during the night to make sure everything's going to fit from the cue. And this is just a link so that we can use it to check various systems. We can bring up the quick flicks page with all of the cloud cameras from the other observatories on our browser. We can also just keep track of where we are in the night, what our procedures are for the night. If we have bad weather, we have a bad weather procedure where we can go through and do specific things to make sure things are working. And then this computer on the far left here is our automation project. This is our observatory automation computer. Essentially, when we first started thinking of going remote, we actually needed to have quite a few things. We needed to be able to look around inside our building so that we could check things. We needed good cameras on the outside of the building so that we could watch the weather. And we needed to have all of the systems that we had to be at the summit to open and close, for example, and turning on and off lights and things like that. All of that had to be automated so that we could check things out. So we have a page here where we can turn on and off the telescope hydraulics. We can open the shutter. We can open the mirror covers. We have the louvers on the side here, these lower panels here, and then the ones up here on top. We can actually open and close those. We can use all of our new vents that we've put in over the last few years. We can actually open and close those as well. We have a windscreen as well, so we can actually raise and lower the windscreen when we need to during the night. We can check our F8 to make sure that the pressure and vacuum are within the proper parameters so that it is in the right shape. And we have other systems, miscellaneous systems like the dry air system. We can turn on and off lights up there. We can check the dry air system. We have a system that blows air over the mirror that was put in at our last shutdown a couple months ago. And this is just to keep condensation off of our primary mirror. So when it gets very humid, like it was this morning up at the summit, and we're closed and we can't observe and we have fog moving through, we can actually turn on this low little fan and it'll just blow air over the mirror and keep condensation from getting on it. That is one of our newest systems. We can also check our dome drive, make sure that the system is on and running. And then we can check our humidifier and make sure that there's nothing unusual going on here. If our reservoir gets really, really cold, then some of the pipes up there might actually freeze and burst. And that has happened in the past, which is why we now have it on a monitoring system. And then we can also go through the various floors. We can actually see the 5th floor. For example, if one of these doors is open, we get a little warning that tells us that the door has opened and closed so that we know if people are still up at the summit and walking around. In the last thing that I ever want to hear is the door to the dome is open in the middle of the night when no one's supposed to be up there. And then we also have a weather strip here as well that we can actually watch. And we have all of our systems on here that can be turned off and on. This has to be completely green when the day crew leaves at the end of the day. That means that we have access to all of the systems at night when we need them. And then they actually have control right now, but you can see there are a lot of lights on up at the summit. Up here, there's somebody standing at the outside of our dome. That's probably the visitor, but we can actually go into the dome here and take a look at the telescope. I can move around inside the dome and take a look at what's going on up there. I also have a little button here that will turn on and off the sound up there, so I can hear anything that might be going on in the dome. So if there were people up in the dome and talking, I would be able to hear them on this system. And I can actually watch as we open open the mirror covers, as we open the shutter. This is the one that we use. As the shutter is opening, we can actually watch it opening remotely from downtown here. And that is pretty much a wide view, essentially, of our remote room here. If anybody has any questions, you can ask me what's going on.
So pre-COVID, how frequently did you guys use the remote area? Were you up on the mountain often, or would you be predominantly in the remote area? We are
predominantly downtown. So we do all of our observing from downtown now. If we have communication problems, or we know that there's going to be, for example, a power outage down here for a certain period of time, we could always go up to send somebody up to the summit and work from up there. The problem with that is we need 2 people because we have a 2-person rule because of the altitude. So we would need to have not just a remote observer, but also someone else to go up with them to be there during the night to observe, to actually just be another warm body in the building, so that just for safety reasons, essentially. But in general, usually we can find somebody else on staff who is willing to go up and spend some time up there while we observe up there.
So Lisa, when did CFHT switch 100% to Waimea?
100%, I believe, was in 2008.
Yeah, so it's been 12, 10, 11 years.
Yeah, it's been quite a while now. Yeah, and I've got about 10 books of observing notes actually to prove it. But yeah, we've been working mostly from downtown for that period of time, and right before that, for probably about a year to a year and a half before that, we were kind of doing hybrid. So we would have somebody sometimes up at the summit, sometimes we would do it from downtown. But this was in the transition period when we were testing everything and making sure everything was going to work properly. So,
cool.
First time I've heard Waimea referred to as downtown. I don't think many people visiting have never been to Waimea and visiting would ever say it was downtown Waimea.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I did get to see it in 2012.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Yeah, the headquarters in Waimea.
Good. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Yeah, we're actually, if you remember where the entrance is on the corner of the building in the front, as you come through that little lobby, we're just to the left right there. So we're just off of the large courtyard.
Okay. So. Yeah, I didn't get inside much. Mostly we were outside with telescopes looking up at the Venus transit.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
So Lisa, you made me feel very old.
Hey, I feel pretty old. What are you
talking about? Yeah, first time I observed with CFHT was in September of 1983.
83, yeah.
Yeah, the camera RCA 1 was 320 by 512 pixels.
Right.
We had no weather satellites, so we would stay at Haleʻipoaku and look at the satellite image in the Honolulu Advertiser, which was probably at least a day old.
Right.
So yeah, things have come a ways.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of those weather satellites, now are those NOAA's satellites or?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Okay.
It's the GO-17 satellite that we usually use, because the one that's Central Pacific, essentially, Central Eastern Pacific, Central Pacific, I guess. So, but I mean, if you think about it, we're kind of in the middle of the Pacific.
Yep.
So, but yeah, the GO-17 is the satellite that we use mostly, and we have had a few problems here and there. Occasionally, in the middle of the night, it'll give us like these bands across the images, and I think there's also a period of time sometimes in the middle of the night where they're upgrading software and things, and so it disappears for maybe an hour, and then it comes back, hopefully, so we can see where the clouds are. But yeah, so it's pretty nice. It's pretty cozy here. We also have our own sound system, so we can plug into music and listen to music. And actually, I'll turn this around for you and show you. There's the courtyard outside.
Oh yes.
So
still
we
daylight.
have a pretty nice courtyard, so we can open that up and see outside. And for our star parties, for example, at night, when we do that, usually it's after the Christmas party, we'll have somebody in here as observing, but we will open up all of the, open up all the screens there so that people can actually look in and watch us observing. And
That's
it's
cool.
here in the fishbowl. We call it the fishbowl. So it's pretty
Well,
nice.
that's cool. Now, the controller that you've got, or the director, what is there? Do you script things in a specific language? Is it a domain-specific language? Or?
Yeah, there are several different languages, I believe, that are used because the telescope is on one system and then our instruments are on another.
Of
and
course.
This controls both of them. So when we are sending information from the queue, when we highlight something in the queue and send it to the telescope and the instrument, essentially this does all of that control. So it kind of standardizes stuff, but it's sending the machine language to each of them separately so that it can be moving the telescope and changing the filter at the same time, for example.
I got you.
So it'll start the filter change and then it'll move the telescope to where it needs to go. And hopefully the filter gets there in the time it takes us to slew. Usually it takes a little longer for the filter to change. And then it'll just automatically start the exposure as soon as we get the guider.
Perfect.
And the guider automatically sets up on its own usually. Sometimes we have to intervene because it'll come in on like one side of the guider and it just needs to be pulled in a little bit further in order for the guider to actually grab it. So that doesn't happen too often, but it does happen.
So you do actually often need somebody there while it's going through its scripting. I got you.
Yes, we do. And actually it's I think we did have plans, I think, and I don't know if they're still in the works, but we were thinking of actually getting an AI type system that will evaluate the weather and choose the appropriate programs to do. I'm not sure that that's still in the works necessarily, but there are still a couple instruments here where centering targets, that sort of thing, still is done automatically by us, essentially, by comparing it with the guider with the finding charts that were given. So for those instruments, it might be a little bit more difficult, especially with high proper motion stars. But for this instrument, for example, once you do the beginning of the night calibrate or beginning of the run calibrations, the pointing and all of the calibration for the guider, usually you can just let it go and it will actually do most of the stuff up on its own. We do like to make comments on each of our images as they come off as well. So if I'm doing, for example, non-sidereal guiding, I actually make note of each of the pixel shifts that we expect so that I can tell how long the trails are. And then I usually check each image as it comes off to make sure the trails actually look straight. Cool. That's another thing. You want to make sure all the trails on our side, on our sidereal are pretty straight, especially if they're very long trailed images. So.
When we talk about AI or some automated algorithm to decide the observations that are happening, I always thought when I started designing this stuff in the late 90s was you'd like a system that makes a suggested list of high priority targets, but you, the observer, makes the final choice about what happens because like that the human has probably insight that is valuable.
Yeah. And actually, a lot of times we can simplify things by making fewer filter changes also, because it takes 2 minutes to change a filter on this. And so if I've got, for example, a set of standards that I have to do, but my first target of the night is, say, in the R band, I can do the U and the G and the Z and the other filters, and then do the R last, and then I'm set to go to my first target. Yep. And I don't, and I minimize the number of changes that I do. So that's one of the things, and that can be taught through an AI system too.
I think AI is at a pretty amazing state at the moment. I mean, I'm sure you could come up. I mean, that's 10 years ago. I mean, at Gemini, I mean, if they can have computer systems to generate algorithms for optimizing flights by, American Airlines or United, I'm sure you could take that software and apply it to telescope observing.
Mhm.
I mean, at the time that was very expensive, so we didn't do it. But yeah,
Right.
it's scheduling is a very classic problem.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And actually, I mean, our QCs do a great job. We pretty much know what our priorities are, as far as what the upcoming run, what the priorities are going to be. And so therefore, we're watching the conditions, and sometimes you're trying to push it a little bit and say, maybe they'll still be able to use this, so I'll take it anyway. Sometimes you say, no, it's just really too bad for this. I'm going to go to something else. So sometimes, it's kind of a judgment call on our part, as far as conditions go. But in general, we have quite a lot of options, because we usually, at least for MegaCam, we usually have at least 3 different cues. One for really, really good image quality. So when we have really good subarc second seeing at 0.6 or 0.5, and we can get through the night and get all of these high priority targets, then we stick to that. When the IQ gets up to maybe 0.8, 0.9, and some of those high priority ones need 0.7 arc second seeing, then we go to our Q2, and that usually is up to 1 or 1.1, somewhere in there. And we can run through those and hopefully get a lot of that done. And if the IQ is really bad, like it was for my last run this past week, I was in Q3 quite a lot. And that's when the IQ is above 1.2 arc seconds. And essentially, I was getting between 1.5 to 2.2 arc second seeing. It was so bad. We had a lot of clouds coming through, but it was a pretty bad system. And actually, in our cloud cameras, you can actually see almost the ripples in the turbulent layer up high in the atmosphere. And so if I see those ripples, I know that the IQ is probably going to be variable during the night. And for those nights, it was definitely very visible. So.
Very nice. Very nice system.
Yeah.
First time I've had it explained in so much detail and very well explained. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Good. Thank you for coming.
It's a pleasure.
I think we're going to be turning it over to our director here shortly. So hopefully.
Oh, I gotta think of a tough question.